He invited her to his wedding to disgrace her, but before the story continues, tell me, where are you watching from, and have you ever been judged unfairly? The city was glowing that evening, wrapped in lights and luxury, as preparations for a grand wedding filled a mansion with noise and pride. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, silk decorations were adjusted again and again, and waiters moved like shadows across marble floors. At the center of it all stood a man in an expensive suit, admired by many, confident beyond measure. This wedding was not just a celebration, it was a statement. He smiled as he looked at the guest list, pausing when he reached one name. Her name. A slow, deliberate smile formed on his lips. He picked up the invitation card, smooth and heavy with gold edges, and held it between his fingers as if it were a weapon. Sending this invitation was not an act of kindness. It was carefully planned. He wanted her to see everything, the wealth, the status, the woman replacing her. He wanted her to feel small. After all, this was the woman he had once called his wife, and later called Barren. In his mind, he could already imagine her reaction. He pictured her standing at the back of the hall, wearing something old and faded, eyes lowered in shame, heartbreaking all over again. He believed she would come quietly, wounded and alone, just to witness what she had lost. Wasn't this the perfect final victory? He remembered the day he walked away from her, how easily he blamed her for everything that went wrong. No child. No future. No worth. Society had agreed with him, his family had supported him, and he never once looked back. To him, her life ended the day he left. As the invitation was sealed and handed over to be delivered, his confidence grew stronger. Tonight, he thought, would close a chapter forever. She will finally understand what she couldn't keep, he told himself. Somewhere across the city, in a quiet and modest place, that invitation would soon reach hands he believed were still trembling. Hands he assumed were empty. A life he thought was still broken. He had no idea that time had been working silently. He did not know that tears had turned into prayers, and prayers into answers. He did not know that the woman he wanted to humiliate was no longer the woman he remembered. The invitation traveled with arrogance, but destiny was already moving faster. And while he celebrated his imagined triumph, fate stood quietly on the other side, smiling. He wants her to witness what she lost, unaware that fate has already rewritten the story. For 7 years, she loved him deeply, yet every month ended with silence and blame. In the beginning, their marriage was simple and full of hope. She entered his home with dreams in her eyes and prayers in her heart, believing love was enough to build a life. She cooked for him, waited for him, and stood by his side in every season. In those early days, laughter lived in the walls, and promises felt unbreakable. But time has a cruel way of testing love. Months passed. Then years. Each passing cycle ended the same way, with waiting, disappointment, and unspoken tension. At first, there were gentle questions. Then worried looks. Soon, the silence grew heavy, and patience began to fade. Whispers entered the house before words did. His family started asking questions she had no answers to. His mother's eyes changed. Relatives visited less, but spoke more. Maybe she is unlucky, someone said. A woman without a child has no roots, another whispered. Every sentence cut deeper than the last. She tried to explain. She suggested doctors, tests, prayers together. But he grew distant, as if her pain embarrassed him. Instead of standing beside her, he slowly stepped away, letting society decide her worth. Every celebration became a reminder. Every child's laughter in the family felt like a verdict against her. At gatherings, she was watched with pity, or worse, blame. She smiled politely, hiding the cracks forming inside her. At night, she cried quietly so no one would hear. Is love supposed to feel this lonely? He stopped defending her. When people spoke badly, he stayed silent. That silence hurt more than insults. Soon, even he began to look at her as if she were the problem. As if her body had betrayed him on purpose. Doctors were mentioned but never truly visited. Truth was delayed. Blame was easy. Days turned into years, 7 long years of giving, waiting, and hoping. 7 years where her identity shrank into one cruel word, barren. Not a wife. Not a companion. Just a failure in the eyes of those around her. And still, she stayed. She stayed because she loved him. Because she believed patience would heal everything. Because women are often taught to endure quietly, even when the weight is too heavy. But society does not reward silent suffering. One day, love was no longer enough to protect her from the judgment that filled that house. The walls that once echoed with laughter now repeated blame. Family pressure, insults, and society's cruelty paint the woman as a failure simply because she had no child. He didn't just divorce her, he erased her worth with his words. Before we go further, pause for a moment. If you believe no woman deserves to be humiliated like this, let your presence be felt, and listen closely to what happens next. The room was filled with people, yet she had never felt more alone. His voice was loud, sharp, and confident, as if rehearsed for this moment. He did not choose privacy. He chose an audience. Words that should have been spoken with care were thrown like stones, one after another. She is useless, he said coldly. She brought nothing into my life. A barren woman is a burden. Each sentence stripped away another layer of her dignity. Family members watched. Some lowered their eyes. Others nodded in silent agreement. No one stopped him. No one stood up for her. In that moment, she understood something painful. This decision had already been made long before it was announced. She tried to speak, but her voice failed her. What defense does a woman have when society has already judged her body? Her hands trembled as she held onto the edge of the table, steadying herself while her life collapsed in front of everyone. Was this all her love was worth? He pushed a small bag toward her. That was all he allowed her to take. No explanations. No apologies. No closure. Just an order to leave. The door closed behind her with a sound that echoed louder than his insults. Outside, the night air was cold and unforgiving. Street lights flickered, cars passed without slowing down, and the world moved on as if nothing had happened. She stood there for a moment, holding that small bag, unsure of where to go or who she was anymore. I gave everything, how did I become nothing? Each step she took away from that house felt heavier than the last. Her feet moved, but her heart lagged behind, still trying to understand how love had turned into shame. Tears fell freely now, no walls left to hide behind, no one left to impress. She had entered that marriage as a wife. She left it as a label. Neighbors whispered. Phones rang with questions she didn't answer. That night, she slept in a place that didn't feel like home, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word spoken against her. Sleep refused to come. Only silence stayed. Yet, even in that darkness, something unseen was shifting. What she believed was an ending was quietly becoming a beginning. The path ahead looked empty, uncertain, and frightening, but destiny often hides behind the moments that break us completely. She did not know it then. She only knew pain. That night, she walks into darkness, stripped of dignity but unknowingly stepping toward destiny. When the truth finally came out, it shattered everything she believed about herself. She did not rebuild her life in a grand house or with sudden success. She rebuilt it quietly, in the spare room of a friend's home, where the walls were plain but the intentions were kind. Every morning, she woke up reminding herself that survival itself was an achievement. The nights were still heavy, but at least they were no longer cruel. Shame followed her like a shadow. When she stepped outside, she felt eyes on her, even when no one was looking. She avoided gatherings, avoided questions, avoided mirrors. The word that had been stamped on her for years still echoed in her mind, even when no one said it aloud. Yet, slowly, routine returned. She found small work, learned to sit with herself again, and allowed silence to stop feeling like punishment. Her friend never asked uncomfortable questions. Sometimes, healing begins not with advice, but with space. Still, fear lived deep inside her. Fear of trusting again. Fear of hoping again. Fear that maybe they were right about her after all. One afternoon, encouraged by a gentle voice that refused to give up on her, she finally visited a doctor. It was not an act of courage, it was exhaustion. She was tired of carrying a blame she did not fully understand. Tests were done. Files were checked. The doctor spoke calmly, almost casually. "There is nothing wrong with you." The words hung in the air, unfamiliar and confusing. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. The doctor continued, explaining what should have been explained years ago. Her body was capable. Healthy. The problem had never been proven, only assumed. In that moment, something cracked open inside her. Then why did they destroy me? Years of insults, rejection, and humiliation suddenly had no foundation. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed shape. Tears filled her eyes, not from grief this time, but from release. She had carried a lie for 7 long years. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future without labels. She began taking better care of herself, not to prove anything to the world, but to reclaim what had been stolen, her belief. She laughed softly again. She prayed with hope instead of desperation. She started to feel like a person, not a verdict. Was this what freedom felt like? Hope did not arrive loudly. It came like a quiet breath after drowning. Slow. Gentle. Real. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time since her marriage ended, she was not afraid to walk it. A medical truth emerges: she was never barren, and hope begins to breathe again. She stopped begging life to be kind, and that's when miracles arrived. Before the story moves forward, if you believe healing can come after heartbreak, stay with me, this moment changes everything. She met him when she was no longer searching for rescue. There was no drama, no sudden spark that demanded attention. He entered her life quietly, like peace does, without force. He listened more than he spoke, and when he looked at her, there was no judgment in his eyes. For the first time, she was not being measured by what she could give, but by who she was. She was careful. Her past had taught her to protect herself, to keep her heart guarded. Yet, his patience never felt heavy. He never asked her to explain her scars. He never rushed her healing. He treated her pain as something sacred, not something to be fixed. Days turned into conversations. Conversations turned into trust. She told him her story, not all at once, but in fragments, like broken glass slowly put back together. He did not interrupt. He did not offer solutions. He simply stayed. And sometimes, staying is the greatest proof of love. Is it really possible to be loved without fear? In his presence, she felt something unfamiliar: safety. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that lets a wounded soul breathe again. They prayed together. They planned nothing. They allowed time to do its work. When they married, there was no grand show. Just sincerity. Just peace. She entered this new chapter without begging God for answers anymore. She trusted that whatever was written for her would arrive in its own time. And then, life surprised her. A doctor's visit. A calm voice. A pause. Then words that felt unreal. She was expecting. Tears streamed down her face, not from disbelief alone, but from gratitude. She held her breath, afraid the moment would vanish. But it didn't. Months passed, and with every passing day, her miracle grew stronger. Then, something even more unexpected happened. Another heartbeat. Then another. God did not answer her tears once. He answered them beyond imagination. The woman once called Barren now held her stomach in awe, whispering prayers of thanks instead of questions of doubt. Her nights were filled with quiet smiles, not fear. Her past no longer defined her future. Who could have imagined this ending for a woman once thrown away? She said nothing to the world. Some victories are too sacred to announce. She carried her blessing in silence, allowing God to complete what He had started. In peace and patience, God answers her tears, not once, but beyond imagination. He stood at the altar smiling, certain the past was beneath him. The wedding hall glowed with luxury. Golden lights reflected off polished floors, fresh flowers filled the air with a heavy sweetness, and soft music played as guests took their seats. Cameras flashed constantly, capturing every angle of what was meant to be a perfect day. This was not just a wedding, it was a public display of success. He stood at the altar like a man who believed he had conquered life. His suit was tailored, his posture confident, his smile practiced. People whispered praises as they passed by. Business partners shook his hand. Relatives admired his rise. Every look he received fed his pride. In his mind, this day proved he had made the right choices. He glanced around the hall, scanning faces, searching without admitting it. He told himself he was only checking the arrangements, but deep down, there was something else. Would she come? He imagined her sitting quietly somewhere near the back, watching him from a distance. The thought amused him. It made him feel powerful. He believed seeing him like this would remind her of her place, and his victory. I survived without her, he thought. I rose because I let her go. The bride arrived in elegance, welcomed by applause and admiration. She stood beside him, beautiful and proud, unaware of the story that still lingered between the walls of this hall. To him, she represented a fresh start, free from shame and waiting. He barely listened to the words spoken around him. His attention drifted between the crowd and the mirrors reflecting his image. He looked like a man with no regrets. Like a man untouched by the past. Outside, expensive cars lined the entrance. Inside, guests recorded videos, shared photos, and praised the grandeur of the event. Everything about the day screamed success, money, power, control. And in that moment, he truly believed he had won. But pride has a way of making people blind. He did not notice how fate was already approaching the doors of that hall. He did not sense that the story he thought was finished was about to return, stronger, calmer, and undeniable. The music grew louder. The ceremony moved forward. His smile never faded. Not yet. The hall fills with power, cameras, and arrogance. The doors opened, and destiny walked in before everyone's eyes. Before you hear what happened next, take a moment. If you believe God's timing is always perfect, stay with this story. Outside the wedding hall, a black luxury car slowed to a gentle stop. Its polished surface reflected the bright lights, drawing curious glances from the guests standing nearby. The driver stepped out and opened the door with quiet respect. Then she appeared. She stepped out calmly, not rushed, not hesitant. Her face carried peace, the kind that comes only after surviving storms. She was radiant, not because of expensive clothes, but because her eyes no longer carried fear. In each hand, She held the child's hand, small fingers wrapped tightly around hers. The moment she took her first step forward, the air changed. Whispers moved faster than footsteps. Is that her? It can't be. Look at the children. Inside the hall, heads began to turn. Conversations stopped halfway through sentences. Phones lowered. Music softened. One by one, eyes followed her as she walked in with quiet grace. She did not look around in search of approval. She did not bow her head in shame. Her posture was steady, her steps unshaken. This was not the woman who once left in tears with a small bag in her hands. I survived what was meant to destroy me, she thought. The children walked beside her confidently, unaware of the storm their presence had created. Their laughter echoed softly, innocent and pure, cutting through years of lies without saying a single word. At the altar, his smile froze. His breath caught in his throat as he recognized her. For a moment, the world around him faded, the guests, the bride, the cameras. All he could see was the woman he had called Barren, standing tall, complete, and untouched by the humiliation he had planned. How could this be? His mind searched for explanations, but none came. The truth was walking toward him, step by step, dressed in calm and dignity. The bride noticed the sudden shift. She followed his gaze and stiffened, confusion clouding her joy. Murmurs grew louder. Some guests stood to see better. Others exchanged uneasy looks, sensing something was wrong. She stopped near the center of the hall. No announcement. No confrontation. Just presence. And that presence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. The children looked up at her, trusting and safe. She squeezed their hands gently, grounding herself in the moment. This was not revenge. This was revelation. The silence was heavy. Unavoidable. Final. She steps out, calm, radiant, holding the hands of children, and the entire hall freezes as whispers spread like fire. No argument was needed, truth stood there breathing. The hall remained silent, as if everyone was waiting for someone to speak, to explain, to deny what their eyes were seeing. But she did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply stood there, calm and unshaken, letting the moment unfold on its own. The groom tried to smile, but he trembled. His confidence cracked under the weight of the stares around him. Questions filled the air without being spoken. Hollow. His victory, empty. The woman he once humiliated had not returned to destroy him, she had returned to reveal him. She did not stay to watch him fall. She turned away, holding the children's hands, choosing peace over spectacle. That choice hurt him more than any insult ever could. The music stopped. The lights felt harsh. The hall that once fed his pride now reflected his shame. The groom's lies collapse, the bride walks away, and shame finally finds its rightful owner. She didn't win by revenge, she won by healing. Before the story closes, pause for a second. If you believe true strength is choosing peace over anger, stay with me till the end. Time passed after the wedding, but the silence it left behind was louder than any celebration. The man who once stood proudly at the altar now sat alone, surrounded by the ruins of his own pride. His name was no longer spoken with admiration. People remembered the truth instead of the show. One evening, he came to her. There was no audience this time. No cameras. No confidence. Just a man stripped of excuses. His shoulders were heavy, his eyes tired. For the first time, he did not speak from power, he spoke from regret. I was wrong, he said quietly. I destroyed what I didn't understand. His words fell to the ground between them, waiting for a response. She looked at him calmly. There was no anger in her eyes, no satisfaction either. Only clarity. She listened, not because he deserved it, but because she no longer feared the past. I carried this pain long enough, she thought. He asked for forgiveness, his voice breaking under the weight of everything he had lost. Not just her, but himself. The success that once defined him meant nothing now. She took a deep breath. Forgiveness did not come as a favor to him. It came as a release for her. She spoke gently, choosing words that closed doors instead of reopening wounds. She forgave him, not to rewrite history, not to fix his regret, but to free her heart from carrying what was never hers to bear. Wasn't peace the real victory all along? She turned away without bitterness. There was nothing left to prove. Her life was full now, filled with love, truth, and blessings she once prayed for in silence. As she walked away, she felt light. Complete. Whole. Behind her, karma stood quietly, doing what it always does, balancing what humans disturb. His downfall was not her triumph. Her healing was. She never looked back. She stepped into the grand hall, her head held high, her heart calm, and her spirit unshaken. The same crowd that once whispered, judged, and mocked her now froze, staring at the woman they thought had nothing. In her hands, she carried not only herself but the proof of her worth, her children, her dignity, her life rebuilt from ashes. Every glance, every murmured question, every moment of shock reminded her that God's timing is perfect, and His justice silent yet undeniable. She walked slowly through the hall, each step echoing confidence and grace, while the man who once sought to humiliate her realized too late the depth of his own pride and mistake. There were no harsh words, no anger, no demands for revenge, only the quiet, undeniable power of truth. As she reached the center, the whispers turned into awe, the arrogance dissolved into silence, and the hall seemed to hold its breath. And in that profound stillness, she understood something greater than any triumph or revenge. Healing is stronger than hatred, faith is mightier than fear, and a life rebuilt with patience and courage shines brighter than any crown or celebration. She smiled softly, looked around once more, and then turned to leave, not to rub her victory in anyone's face, but to walk into the next chapter of her life, free, whole, and radiant, knowing that God had always been with her, and that nothing in the past could touch the future He had planned. Every footstep away from the hall carried a message louder than any words, that true victory is not measured by the fall of others, but by the rise of one's own spirit, and that grace, patience, and faith always prevail in the end.